Have you ever wanted something more intensely before you had it than after it arrived? The package is exciting while it is still moving toward your door. The message matters most while the three dots are on the screen. The first bite is imagined for hours, then barely noticed while you are eating it. We assume rewards create habits, but often, anticipation is what gives the habit its power. Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is Wise Mind Stories. In the last episode, Mara discovered the loop behind her nightly phone checking. A cue, a routine, and the brief reward of certainty. But the power of habit adds another layer. A loop becomes especially powerful when the cue begins to produce a craving, when the brain starts expecting the reward before the routine begins. In this episode, Mara will discover that the same force pulling her toward a screen is being deliberately built into Brightcart's newest product, because the most effective habits do not wait for the reward. They teach you to feel its absence. 2 weeks after June's science fair, Mara was invited to a meeting called Project Lantern. The room had no windows. On the wall, a screen displayed a green circle slowly filling around a white shopping bag. When the circle closed, a soft tone played. Everyone at the table smiled. That, said Theo Grant, Brightcart's head of growth, is the sound of dinner solving itself. Project Lantern was designed to increase repeat orders. Customers would receive a message near the time they usually began thinking about dinner. If they opened the app, the green circle would show how close they were to unlocking a personalized delivery window. Add 3 familiar items, and the order could be completed with one swipe. The team had tested 6 colors, 9 sounds, and 23 versions of the message. The winning line was not, "Your groceries are waiting." It was, "You're almost done." Almost. The word made an unfinished action feel as if it already belonged to the customer. Theo showed the first results. People who saw the green circle opened the app more often. They returned sooner. They added items they had not searched for. Most important, they began opening Brightcart a few minutes before the notification usually arrived. "We're becoming part of the evening," he said. Mara looked at the graph. The line rose at 5:42 p.m., though the message was scheduled for 5:45. "Why are they opening early?" she asked. Theo's smile widened. "They know it's coming." That sentence followed Mara out of the room. At 9:34 that night, she was helping June glue photographs onto a history board. Her phone was charging in the hallway, out of sight. At 9:36, Mara felt the familiar tension gather in her chest. At 9:37, the phone had not made a sound. Still, her mind produced an image of the blue dashboard loading. For 1 second, she could almost feel the relief. The reward had not arrived. The routine had not begun. Yet part of her brain was already leaning toward the ending. She knew it was coming. This is the distinction between reward and craving. A reward is what the routine delivers. A craving is the expectation that the reward is available. The cue becomes powerful not because it contains the pleasure, relief, or certainty itself, but because it predicts that those feelings are near. Over time, the prediction can begin before the cue fully appears. The smell outside a bakery is not food, but the body prepares. The notification badge is not connection, but attention narrows. The unopened bottle is not relief, but the mind rehearses the first sip. The shopping app is not a completed dinner, but the phrase "almost done" creates a gap that wants to be closed. What are you actually craving when you say you want the thing? The object or the feeling it predicts? The message or proof that you matter to someone? The purchase or the temporary possibility of becoming a different person? The dashboard or a few minutes without uncertainty? The most effective habits do not wait for the reward. They teach you to feel its absence. Project Lantern launched on Monday. By Thursday, repeat orders were up 11% in the test cities. At the celebration, Theo placed a small brass lantern on the conference table. Someone ordered sparkling wine. The product team watched a live map bloom green as customers completed their circles. One dot flashed in Rivergate. Then, another. Then hundreds. Mara understood why the room felt triumphant. A complicated product had worked. Customers were completing an annoying task faster. Families were getting groceries without spending an hour in a store. Habit design was not automatically exploitation. Many useful products become useful because they reduce friction and attach a satisfying feeling to repetition. The morning checklist that makes medication easier to remember. The running group whose greeting becomes part of the reward. The language app that makes progress visible. The clean scent that tells the brain, a room is finished. The ethical question was not whether a habit had been created, it was whose life the habit was designed to serve. Near the end of the celebration, an analyst named Priya Shah opened a customer session on the screen. The account belonged to someone identified only as R1847. At 5:42, the customer opened the app. At 5:44, she added pasta, sauce, and detergent. Then removed the detergent, added it again, scrolled through snacks, closed the app. At 5:45, Lantern arrived. You're almost done. The customer reopened the app in 4 seconds. She added 8 more items. That is beautiful, Theo said. Priya did not laugh. She had already placed an order yesterday. The room went quiet. Priya opened a second panel. The customer had completed 4 orders in 6 days. 2 were below the minimum she had set in her own account budget. Each time, she had opened just before the lantern message. Maybe she has a large family, someone offered. Maybe, Priya said. Or maybe the anticipation is becoming the product. Theo closed the panel. One customer is not a pattern. He was correct, technically. But every pattern begins as a single event that someone decides is not worth seeing. Mara went back to her desk and opened her red notebook. On a fresh page, she drew 2 loops. The first was hers. 9:37. Uncertainty. Dashboard. Relief. The second belonged to Project Lantern. 5:45. Unfinished circle. Order. Completion. Then she added a line before each loop. Expected relief. Expected completion. Craving did not sit at the end. It reached backward and gave the cue emotional force. That is why simply placing a reward after a behavior does not guarantee a habit will form. The brain must learn what the cue predicts. It must begin to want the feeling before it arrives. And this is also why a healthy routine often dies after 3 days. You decide to walk every morning. The cue is your shoes by the door. The reward is better health in 6 months. But 6 months is too far away for an exhausted brain at 6:30 a.m. The cue predicts cold air, effort, and lost sleep, not an immediate feeling worth pursuing. Or you decide to study after dinner. The reward is passing an exam next month. The cue predicts confusion and the possibility that you are behind. Meanwhile, your phone predicts novelty within 1 second. The competition is not between a good goal and a bad goal. It is between a distant benefit and an immediate expectation. June understood this before Mara did. She had been trying to practice guitar after school, but the instrument predicted 20 minutes of sounding clumsy, while her phone predicted immediate competence inside games she already knew. So, June changed the beginning. She reserved one favorite song for practice, placed the guitar on a stand instead of inside its case, and ended each session by recording 10 seconds of whatever had improved. The music, the visible instrument, and the tiny recording did not replace the long-term goal. They gave the cue something nearer to promise. 2 weeks later, June did not love every practice. But she had begun to miss the small moment when yesterday's difficult chord sounded slightly less impossible. So how do useful cravings grow without becoming tricks? Mara tested the question on herself. She could not make being present with my family arrive as a dramatic reward every night. Real relationships do not deliver a chime each time you pay attention. But she could make completion visible. At 9:25, she reviewed the Brightcart dashboard once and wrote any unresolved concern on a card. At 9:30, she sent a single closing message to her team. Anything not urgent can wait until morning. Then, she placed the card beneath the red notebook and closed it. The first few nights, the ritual felt artificial. On the fourth night, she noticed something small. The act of closing the notebook produced a physical exhale. The cue at 9:30 was beginning to predict release rather than vigilance. Not because a clever slogan had hypnotized her, because the routine gave the brain a believable ending. At work, she asked Priya to compare lantern orders with cancellations, budget alerts, and repeat purchases customers later removed. She also proposed a change. The circle would still help people finish an intended order, but Lantern would not appear if a customer had already ordered recently, had reached a self-selected budget, or repeatedly removed items before checkout. The message would become, "Ready when you are," not, "You're almost done." Theo stared at the new wording. That will perform worse. Probably. Then why would we use it? Mara turned the screen toward him. Because a product can make repetition easier without making incompletion painful. Theo leaned back. You think a green circle is coercion? No. I think pretending design has no intention is how coercion gets built one harmless choice at a time. The change did perform worse. Opening rates fell. Average basket size declined slightly. Complaints and canceled orders also fell. No one applauded that graph. Mara saved it anyway. There is a practical way to examine craving in your own life. Call it promise, feeling, delay, design. First, identify the promise. When the cue appears, what does your brain expect is about to happen? Second, name the feeling, not the object. Connection, relief, stimulation, certainty, completion, belonging. Third, measure the delay. How quickly does the routine deliver something noticeable? A reward too distant or vague will struggle against a competing habit that pays immediately. Fourth, design an honest anticipation. Make a healthy routine easier to look forward to, but do not confuse encouragement with manipulation. Pair the routine with music you enjoy. Make progress visible. End work with a closing ritual. Join people whose presence becomes part of the reward. The goal is not to manufacture desire for every virtuous action. It is to stop asking a distant outcome to compete with an immediate promise. At 9:30 on Friday, Mara closed the red notebook. Her hand still moved slightly toward the hallway. Then June slid a bowl of popcorn across the table and pressed play on a documentary they had been postponing for weeks. Mara felt the old promise, check the dashboard, and uncertainty will disappear. Beside it, a newer promise had begun to form. Close the day, and you can return to the room you are already in. The most effective habits do not wait for the reward. They teach you to feel its absence. So ask yourself, what absence has your habit trained you to feel? And could a more honest routine begin promising the feeling you actually need? If this episode helped you name one craving, subscribe to Wise Mind Stories and share the feeling, not the behavior, in the comments. Sometimes the word relief explains more than the word phone, food, or work ever could. But recognizing a craving still leaves a difficult problem. If an old cue keeps returning, and the old reward still matters, can the habit really be changed? In the next episode, we will explore the golden rule of habit change. Why deleting a routine often creates an empty space. How a replacement can preserve the reward without preserving the damage. And why belief becomes essential when stress brings the old loop back. Because a habit rarely disappears when you remove the behavior. It waits to see what will take its place. EP3, The Golden Rule of Change. A late-night system failure brings Mara's old routine back in seconds and forces her to learn why understanding a loop is not the same as surviving one.